Chapter 8 of 50 Years in Chains, or the Life of an American Slave. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 50 Years in Chains, or the Life of an American Slave, by Charles Ball. Chapter 8. At the time of which I now speak, the rice was ripe and ready to be gathered. On Monday morning, after our feast, the overseer took the whole of us to the rice field, to enter upon the harvest of this crop. The field lay in a piece of low ground near the river, and in such a position that it could be flooded by the water of the stream in wet seasons. The rice is planted in drills, or rows, and grows more like oats than any other grain known in the North. The water is sometimes let into the rice fields, and drawn off again several times, according to the state of the weather. Watering and weeding the rice is considered one of the most unhealthy occupations on a southern plantation, as the people are obliged to live for several weeks in the mud and water, subject to all the unwholesome vapors that arise from stagnant pools under the rays of a summer sun, as well as the chilly autumnal dews of night. At the time we came to cut this rice, the field was quite dry, and after we had reaped and bound it, we hauled it upon wagons to a piece of hard ground, where we made a threshing floor and threshed it. In some places they tread out the rice, with mules or horses, as they tread wheat in Maryland, but this renders the grain dusty, and is injurious to its sale. After getting in the rice, we were occupied for some time in clearing and ditching swampy land, preparatory to a more extended culture of rice the next year, and about the 1st of August, 20 or 30 of the people, principally women and children, were employed for 2 weeks in making cider of apples, which grew in an orchard of nearly 200 trees, that stood on a part of the estate. After the cider was made, a barrel of it was one day brought to the field and distributed amongst us, but this gratuity was not repeated. The cider that was made by the people was converted into brandy at a still in the corner of the orchard. I often obtained a cider to drink at the still, which was sheltered from the weather by a shed of boards and slabs. We were not permitted to go into the orchard at pleasure, but as long as the apples continued, we were allowed the privilege of sending 5 or 6 persons every evening, for the purpose of bringing apples to the quarter for our common use, and by taking large baskets and filling them well, we generally contrived to get as many as we could consume. When the peaches ripened, they were guarded with more rigor, peach brandy being an article which is nowhere more highly prized than in South Carolina. There were on the plantation more than 1,000 peach trees, growing on poor sandy fields, which were no longer worth the expense of cultivation. The best peaches grow upon the poorest sand hills. We were allowed to take 3 bushels of peaches every day for the use of the quarter, but we could and did at least 3 times that quantity, for we stole at night that which was not given us by day. I confess that I took part in these thefts, and I did not feel that I committed any wrong against either God or man by my participation in the common danger that we ran, for we well knew the consequences that would have followed detection. After the feast at laying by the corn and cotton, we had no meat for several weeks, and it is my opinion that our master lost money by the economy he practiced at this season of the year. I now entered upon a new scene of life. My true value had not yet been ascertained by my present owner, and whether I was to hold the rank of a first or second rate hand could only be determined by an experience of my ability to pick cotton. I had ascertained that at the hoe, the spade, the sickle, or the flail, I was full match for the best hands on the plantation, but soon discovered when we came to cotton picking I was not equal to a boy of 15. I worked hard the first day, but when evening came and our cotton was weighed, I had only 38 pounds, and was vexed to see that 2 young men about my own age had, one 58 and the other 59 pounds. This was our first day's work, and the overseer had not yet settled the amount of a day's picking. It was necessary for him to ascertain by the experience of a few days how much the best hands could pick in a day, before he established the standard of the season. I hung down my head, and felt very much ashamed of myself when I found that my cotton was so far behind that of many, even the woman who had heretofore regarded me as the strongest and most powerful man of the whole gang. I had exerted myself today to the utmost of my power, and as the picking of cotton seemed to be so very simple a business, I felt apprehensive that I should never be able to improve myself so far as to become even a second-rate hand. In this posture of affairs I looked forward to something still more painful than the loss of character which I must sustain, both with my fellows and my master, for I knew that the lash of the overseer would soon become familiar with my back if I did not perform as much work as any of the other young men. I expected, indeed, that it would go hard with me even now, and stood by with feelings of despondence and terror, whilst the other people were getting their cotton weighed. When it was all weighed, the overseer came to me where I stood, and told me to show him my hands. When I had done this, and he had looked at them, he observed, "You have a pair of good hands. You will make a good picker." This faint praise of the overseer revived my spirits greatly, and I went home with a lighter heart than I had expected to possess before the termination of cotton picking. When I came to get my cotton weighed on the evening of the second day, I was rejoiced to find that I had 46 pounds, although I had not worked harder than I did the first day. On the third evening I had 52 pounds, and before the end of the week there were only 3 hands in the field, 2 men and a young woman, who could pick more cotton in a day than I could. On the Monday morning of the second week, when we went to the field, the overseer told us that he fixed the day's work at 50 pounds, and that all those who picked more than that would be paid a cent a pound for the overplus. 25 pounds was assigned as the daily task of the old people, as well as a number of boys and girls, whilst some of the women who had children were required to pick 40 pounds, and several children had 10 pounds each as their task. Picking of cotton may almost be reckoned among the arts. A man who has arrived at the age of 25 before he sees a cotton field will never, in the language of the overseer, become a crack picker. By great industry and vigilance I was able at the end of a month to return every evening a few pounds over the daily rate, for which I received my pay. But the business of picking cotton was a fatiguing labor to me, and one to which I never became reconciled, for the reason that in every other kind of work I was called a first-rate hand, whilst in cotton picking I was hardly regarded as a prime hand. End of chapter 8.